live.
Yeah, you're live.
Your mic is hot, so
He's
whatever you were
waiting for
whispering
action.
to each other, the whole world knows. I couldn't hear it, but everybody else could.
Yep.
Welcome
we
to
were
the
talking
last
about
day of BizCon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a very good way to like surmise the end of BizCon is a little bit of disorganized chaos. How's it been for you guys down there?
Spectacular. Honestly, like, so to introduce my good friend
Please
Art
do.
of Western States.
New guy.
Maxwell of Across International, for those that I haven't met on the floor yet. Art and Western States make excellent extraction centrifuges, and Art was part of the industry and, legacy prior. So, like, myself, him, Dustin, Fox, Don, your reputations precede you. We all have seen the industry evolve. It's changed a lot. Times have changed. And some things change, some things stay the same, in the great words of a great songwriter, singer-songwriter. And so it's interesting to reflect upon the industry as a whole and talk about where we're at now and where we would like to see it go versus where it's been. So
Well,
with
where's
that
it at?
context, it's been a good show for us because Across International long established our brand from only aligning ourselves with brands that held our level of respect and importance to the legacy people that made the cannabis industry what it is, and what I would dare say are the only possible people that can save it from the doldrums in which it is currently trapped.
It isn't definitely in an interesting place, that's for sure.
Yes.
When
Maybe
I said
it's
I was
not a
going
doldrums.
to
Let's talk about
platform Max, this is what he had in his mind. A platform that is mine. I love it.
And I think in contrast, we were just talking about it, 2018 BizCon to 2024
Yeah.
is completely fucking different.
Whole
Hugely.
different world.
I mean, you had Deutsche,
Multiple
had their
floors.
100 foot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Probably spent
Multiple-
$250,000 just for the
multiple-story,
space. Yeah.
And it was wall to wall extraction equipment, and wall to wall money being spent.
Yeah.
And I mean, you had Hempocalypse that was kind of brewing right about that time, and everybody was 1,000 pounds a day, ready to extract their life away and get their $10,000 a kilo for CBD. And then
The good old days.
fast forward to tons of people losing money, and a lot of people going out of business, extraction company wise. And now I didn't go to BizCon myself, but we've been busy. But I heard from a lot of people that went that equipment and kind of extractor operator based stuff at BizCon was super small this year.
It was very
no.
minimal.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
think it
weird
was
to
a good
think
thing, though.
where'd that market go? Where'd that money go? Did it just poof with hemp?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's got to be secondary market and tertiary market. As far as used equipment, you see a lot of consolidation. A lot of these labs are set up. There's not
Right.
this boom of new labs, all this fresh money. Like you mentioned, the hemp apocalypse, but before the Hempocalypse was the hemp boom, where everybody and their grandpa had money to spend on equipment because they were going to build the next greatest 1,000-pound-a-day lab or whatever it was.
Exactly.
So those were the heydays for equipment makers. It was easy to make money in equipment. Right now, it's not easy to make money in
Well,
equipment
no,
because
there's
it's
used equipment to mount
the
all
market
that.
has matured, and so being an equipment manufacturer seller is a much more difficult place to be in purely cannabis.
I don't know. It is and it isn't.
Sure.
If you're just going to come out and you're going to white label some equipment that you're importing, you know nothing really about it, you don't support it, because the equipment business in any manufacturing industry is based on service and parts.
Right.
Keeping that customer for a long time, making sure that they're happy and they're producing. And that was lost with about 80% of who rolled in the hemp boom.
Yeah, when your customers go out of business for no problem
I
of
mean,
your own.
people
Yeah.
were opening and shutting doors within the same year. So I think what we see now is we see it solidifying to the people who are going to stay around, and then a few new technologies or stolen technologies that introduce themselves. And I think that's kind of what we'll continue to see. I don't think that we're going to see less customers. I just think people are going to start having less options. And not for technology, just not 8 options for the same device.
Sure.
That's
Well, and how do you
replicated
Less
think-
over and
redundancy.
over.
Less redundancy.
How do you think an equipment company like yourself, what do you do to stay ahead of that? What do you do to have an edge? What do you do to stay ahead and be, constantly innovating? And
I would say top 2 things: care about and listen to my dear customers, friends,
Yes.
the people that are at the forefront of this industry, the pioneers that care about this plant, and not only like hemp and cannabis plant medicine, like plant medicine in general. Like, I think we're in a very unique stage of history. Like, I think that these talks will be looked at many, many, many years from now, because there was a transition from the mass production, like the commoditization and like the simplification of medicine into a profiteering industry. And I think that was a lot of part of the Hempocalypse. Like, yes, there was a lot of equipment manufacturers that did not care about their customer and listen to their customer as much as an Across International or a Western States did. But also there were people getting into an industry as prospectors
Yes.
that weren't passionate about it, that didn't really know how to grow cannabis, that didn't know it was hard, you know, that didn't know extracting it and
I
making
mean,
a
there were a
product
lot of pipe dreams, honestly.
Yeah.
There were people that were advocates or some that just were passionate about the industry and they just wanted in. They thought that was the quick in. They had heard somebody was making X or Y off of distillate. All of a sudden, they were going to start, cropping acres and turning it into oil, and they didn't have a clue of how any of it works.
And right
they
now
put all
they're
their money and life savings into it or got investors, and that happened over and over again. And that's why there were so many equipment sellers for a long time. It's because they were needed. Like, we'd have long lead times as a reputable reseller because we make sure it's quality. Whereas other people were just buying and kind of reselling whatever it was. There was still space for them there.
Well, a lot of the
there were so
problem
many
that we
buyers.
ran into is that the reputable quality companies would not sell to us. They said we don't sell the cannabis.
Not
people.
all of them.
No, but that's why a lot of those popped up. Is
Oh,
because
originally,
there was
yes.
a gap. Yeah,
Yes.
there's this, and even in
You're right.
2018, we were still seeing little bits of that.
Harvest Right.
Well,
Yeah, Harvest
yeah.
Right. Those Mormons.
Well, but that's
wouldn't
why
touch
every
us.
Yeah, they
OG
absolutely
in the
hate
game.
us.
That's why every OG in the game has an AI oven.
knows
That's
about
why we
that.
are all AI
Yeah,
fans.
literally.
You know, we are everyone at this
First
table.
oven
Oh,
was
my,
an AI.
my
Those are the only
brothers
ones that
and
were
ours
around
are
for
all-
a
Yeah,
long time.
and
They're like pre-Alibaba.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
Alibaba ripped us off.
Yeah, the demise of AI.
damn it,
Fucking
You
Alibaba.
and me both, buddy.
But that being said, I think that also, like, the producer processors not necessarily always taking their time to make a good product lost a lot of credibility. At the end of the day, the consumers we kind of need to convert, you know what I mean? Like, stoners will continue consuming. People that like cannabis, they're in the market space already. Now let's get everyone around plant medicine. And how are you going to do that? By making it a product people want something to do with.
Yeah, drinks.
And- well, there is that. Formulation is incredibly important. That's why, like, we offer a nanoemulsion technology, obviously, like ethanol extraction, like all of this goes hand in hand. For formulation, I agree. And there are people that'll just be the only way that they consume plant medicine in their lives, but that has a place in the market.
Huge
But
place, yeah.
there's a ton of people that say they're doing nanoemulsions and they're north of 500 nanometers in their particle size. So you're not really getting the bioavailability or the
Twice as
uptake.
effective.
Yep.
It's not as effective. And so people buy products. They say this doesn't work.
Snake oil.
And then they don't buy them again.
Yeah, there goes
And then
CBD.
the entire industry and credibility of the entire movement suffers as a whole.
You just explained the
Yes.
CBD boom and bust in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly
Yeah.
right. I
Fun
think
times.
also it was a lot slower because we didn't see as much of the international crowd because now you've seen a lot more of each country holding it down for their own as far as publicizing, trying to get advocates out there and actually creating change. So they have their big conferences themselves. They don't really necessarily need MJBiz the same way they did before for information. They've obtained that. They stopped coming because I saw a lot less of that this year than any other year.
Kind of what Charles was saying, and he was drawing comparison to Cannabis and how BizCon's
Yes.
kind of tracking down, where Cannabis and some of the international markets are starting to
booming.
track up.
Yes, Brazil. I mean, there's so many markets that are just trending
Colombia.
up fast. Colombia's
So you think
great.
just new opportunities are making people flock to.
I think
those
it's more
places.
convenience of the same opportunity.
Yeah.
Because those same big people that they need to know in the industry, whether it's across international Western states or somebody on the other auxiliary sides, they're going to those countries already to the trade shows. So they don't feel the need that they need to come to MJBiz anymore. The ones that do are already either here or trying to do something in collaboration of.
But they came and learned what they needed to and applied it. you know?
Right.
Yep.
And they got it home and they got some of our best and brightest minds working over there in a lot of those countries. And, you know, the world is growing as far as its own knowledge, its own events. So that kind of takes away a little bit from MJBiz.
Absolutely.
Well, and you've probably seen that. You've been all over the country this year to Benzinga and NECANN and all the different spots. So I'm sure those conventions are getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, we picked the ones that we thought were going to be the winners and kind of left the rest behind. And I would argue we picked really well this year because like you said, Benzinga, NECANN, and I did my first Hall of Flowers, so I can't
Hall of
really
Flowers,
compare
that
it
was
to
good.
previous ones, but they opened up to the general public this year. It was a fantastic event.
Nice.
All of those conferences were incredible this year, and each for their own reasons. NECANN because it's in the right place at the right time. It's on the East Coast, which is the exciting place to be in the
Popping
United
off.
States. Yeah, so we'll have at least another year of that. Benzinga because of who it applies to. The money and the people making the decisions were at Benzinga almost exclusively. It was like your boss and his investors, and your boss was working the booth. They didn't have a huge trade show, but they had. I've never been to a trade show where you could talk to so many. The executive was there.
Yeah, senior
direct
executive.
Yeah,
like
the
leader
booth girl
crazy
was
shit.
the vice president of the whole thing.
I don't think
So-
I've ever seen that.
no,
It's a
it
good
was
conference.
nuts and it was dope. And then Hall of Flowers is just this class. It was very reminiscent to. I mean, it wasn't the open market that Emerald Cup used to be, but it felt like that. The vibe was like that, and it was open consumption. You could buy weed, like it was a festival, like a classic California festival, and the vibe was right. So, yeah, but on the flip side, there's like 3 or 4 more that at the beginning of the year we were kind of maybe going to do something with, and as we watched it and let it play, we said probably not, guys, and they sank. There's quite a few. Most of the other conferences are probably won't be around anymore. And unless BizCon pivots really hard, their days are numbered as well.
Well, I think it kind of shows like the West has already won. And like what you're saying is these new markets, East Coast, other countries, so on and so forth. That's what's new. That's the new hot chick at school. So you're going to see everybody flocking to those opportunities when, the fucking, $600 fucking liter in Cali is just, it's no fun anymore.
Yeah, and when it costs $500 to come to this thing that's a bunch of old, sad brands, and they don't really have very innovative programming, and they're trying. This year they tried harder than they had before. They hired a great new group of gals to run kind of their culture side of things, and a lot of it was good, but
Too little, too late.
I hope not. I like BizCon.
I do too, but I will tell you,
Little chatty.
just from the vibe 2 years ago to, I missed the last 2 years from 2017, when we were just talking about it, to this one. And it was entirely different in the sense of it felt like almost a shell. You have the core companies doing what they continue to do, providing great customer service, but in reality, the variety of companies as far as innovation, that part of these conferences, which is always something to look forward to. I felt like part of what you guys mentioned with Hempocalypse and all that, and other current events, which essentially I feel like our industry changes and evolves all the time. And maybe part of it is that not everyone in it adapts to those changes. And so I'm curious myself whether or not it's the state of the industry, what's currently happened, or people's inability or not desire to change into what this scene is changing into.
You literally plucked the thought from my head, Fox, because I was going to say, like, people like you guys, like Dustin, Fox, Don, like people that are incredibly passionate about the plant to the point that you're going to stick with the industry through those highs and lows. That person is although there are many of us, they're quite rare, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so I think that a lot of the people that have participated in the market in the United States, in North America and Canada, like throughout, the kind of quote unquote saturated markets, I think that a lot of them have lost the energy. But I think what Art and I have seen in places like Catalunya with Cannabis, like in País Vasco, Euskadi with Expo Grow, with all of the different Latin American conferences like Expo Medeweed in Colombia, and all those different conferences in Latin America, I feel like they still have that energy and that passion.
That's what causes the innovation, you know, without that drive of wanting something different, wanting something more. I think also them putting their twists on things, even if it's a drinkable, if it's a native drink, or having less stringent alcohol infused rules, they're able to already play with rums that are infused with cannabis, beers that are infused with cannabis, different hops going back the other way. You get some exciting stuff happening, but I think honestly, it's not necessarily a fear of change. I think it's a lack of innovation, even from manufacturers like we're working on things, but it takes time for us to roll something out because there's proper research and development. And that's another reason a lot of those manufacturers who were on the floor or not is they came out with something new and exciting and it looked really cool, but it never worked. Yeah. And everybody who bought it, it broke and there was no service for it. And then they just bailed on the whole idea. Yeah. But some of those ideas were brilliant. They just weren't thought out. They didn't do the proper research and development. So I think you're going to see some new things coming out in extraction. I know you will in the next 5 to 10 years. Evolutions, whether it's more efficiency in ethanol, less pieces of equipment needed, changes across the board. But we're not there right now. Like you said, there's a lack of energy, especially in the States. It's like complacency. Yeah. Like the industry's making paper. Why do we need to change anything?
Well, and like, again, like we've all of us have been in the industry a very long time. We've been seeing each other's for shows for many, many years. Like at this point, like we don't necessarily love to toot our own horns, but we've process optimized. You know what I mean? Like I have, admittedly, I've celebrated my dozen years, 12th year with Across International this year. Like nice. There are things still change. I appreciate that, guys. Thank you. I wouldn't have stuck around if it weren't for all you guys making me feel so warm and fuzzy all the time. And so that being said, there are still changes and innovations happening, but they're smaller, they're incremental, they're like a little glassware change here or a little process optimization and a filtration process there. For a lay person, it's probably less exciting than the 100-foot by 40-foot booth that Deutsche had with a bunch of giant signs that said, don't take any pictures, when nobody knew how to process extracts. Right. And most people were doing it in like a garage or whatever the collective state licensed premier extract manufacturing facility was operating at the time. And so I think, again, I hope that where the industry is going, like the future, is a refocus. Like I think that, and people were getting upset with me for equating it, and I understand why, because this plant medicine has so much more potential than an alcohol or another like commodity. But I equate it to essentially like the Budweiser generation or phase of cannabis development. Like people were brewing beer in their bathtubs and or barrel of choice. Then there was a focus on commoditizing, mass production. Quality was not necessarily the focus of every brand. Maybe some, but not every brand was focused on quality. They mass produced a product to a market that wasn't necessarily educated, because I don't know how much beer nor cannabis and hemp sommelier courses and academic education programs. Dustin and I have been talking about a lot that this year, like what's the next step? Like educating the consumer so that the people that really care about the plant and contribute and make progress in this industry and make things better and move things forward. I think that education of the consumer, of everyone as a whole, so that we can get this, off the board on a global and intergalactic level, and paying more attention to the people that really brought the hemp and cannabis industry where it needs today, which is a lot of Across International success. Like, yeah, we develop lots of cool equipment, but listening to you guys, to what you actually need, caring about people is the most important part of any business that's people facing. If you take care of plants or animals, you care about what's best for them, but for people facing businesses.
We got people here who are lifelong living and breathing in the industry. And I mean, I want to know if you agree with me. I don't think it's up to the companies to bring that back around. I think it's up to the people to demand it. To stop shopping at places that don't tell them what they're getting, to stop buying brands that aren't consistent across markets if they're buying it for medicinal purposes, so that the people who are doing that can actually be praised and get the profit from it that they deserve.
Well, I think it'll revive the culture. I think consumer education will really revive the culture. Chris Baroni said recently that the culture is dead, and what he meant by that was basically that the corporate chads have kind of come in and there's no quality and everything's, cheap and fast. And
right.
I think that the start to reviving that, I don't think it's dead. I think it's under attack. And I think the start to reviving that is consumer education.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. But who drives that? Is it the consumer demanding it? or is it all of us as advocates
it's
and
us,
consumers?
100%.
I
Right.
think if you're in this industry long enough, you sort of do have a responsibility to have some act in that.
I was
Everything
gonna
I've done
say-
from the beginning was very rooted in educating people on what I was doing
And it
because
goes
it
back to
didn't make a
passion.
lot of sense
Yeah.
to people who it wasn't necessarily affecting. And
Right.
then that pool got bigger, and this was that pre-CBD burst. And then once it became this weird, crazy thing where you couldn't find it anywhere, and now it's everywhere you wouldn't expect to find it, and the quality of it, like you said, it's fast and cheap, and they've monetized it, and there's very few companies in that space that even have the passion for just caring about what they're putting out. And so I think if you've been able to be in this industry as long as any of us have, we all owe it to the people that support us, the consumers, the people who we share this space with, to do right by them. And so whatever anyone can equate that to, I think it means, we have to educate the people that continue to support us, but also be in line with what they want, what the market asks for, and adjust, because sometimes, my kid wants to be a race car driver, but she can't get it out of reverse right now, and still in high school.
Yeah.
So it's like
One
baby
day.
steps, let's adjust.
Yeah.
So, I think that comes along even now we're almost in 2025 now. That still happens now. I'm currently in the Washington market, and I'm finding as I'm figuring out all the things about this market is there is a lot of education that needs to be put in place, because it was one of the first to become recreational. And while people are so used to it, it's not such a big deal out there. People are also becoming complacent to what things actually are, and the realization of what they're expecting is really what I say. It's like yesteryear stuff. It's like we've become fully round circle to much better, more adaptable, more bioavailable ways of helping them. And so I'm trying to get us out of or at least where I'm at, I don't know if it's like that. I haven't been to Seattle much. I imagine it's way different. But where I'm at, Spokane, I'm fighting a culture of people who have a misunderstanding about everything from hydrocarbons to solventless. And so going back to, instead of just cranking it out and being able to make this or that, I have to now educate and explain in the best way possible why this is better, and being in a place where I can actually provide it in the best way possible now, and make it, whether it's for the person who is completely compassionate, budget, whatever, to the person who is, I'm just chasing flavors.
Right.
It's hard to measure out have something for everyone, but finally in that position to do so. So I think if producers can do that and not just pump out what's cheap for the quickest SKU that they make, and actually give every product that they make the full support of the people who intend on purchasing or consuming it, I think we'd be a lot better along than we are now. So
Well,
Completely agree.
I completely agree, Fox, and I appreciate your craftsmanship, man. Again, Fox is talking about educating people in Spokane on the different types of terps and trikes that they should be enjoying, but he's also growing those terps and trikes and extracting them and running his business. And so I think that there's a situation in the industry where all of us don't know if we have the time to focus on what ultimately might become the most important part, which is the
Education, man.
And at the end of the day, I think part of the problem is also regulatory, because I think that we definitely breached a gap here. You guys did a phenomenal job with the Good Life Gang party here at Planet 13. Thank you. Shout out to Planet 13, our hosts.
For sure.
Being able to consume and have someone who is serving you concentrates and flower and plant medicine and educating you on different ways to consume it, why terpenes and cannabinoids are important, that is not a platform that's available everywhere. Consumption lounges is a huge debate topic. If there's anybody in Washington and/or in global leadership listening right now, there isn't enough venues for education. Sommelier
There could be, but
popping
we
up. There
can't
could be.
truly educate and tell someone that it'll work for them. Otherwise, we're breaking that law where we can get in trouble, especially as a shop owner, because you can't make claims that are medical without having that backup, that the government won't attack you and you won't get sued, that if it didn't work for that customer. So you have to be very careful with your verbiage. I mean,
That's a very valid point.
Yeah.
That's
Again,
something I'm trying to figure
a
out.
regulatory
It's
point.
more
It's
about
very
what we're
valid, but it's
allowed to do as
regulatory.
producers
Right.
and what we can say, and then
you have to
finding
watch
the
your
loopholes
wording with
where
everything you're trying to educate them with, and
100%.
it makes it very difficult. You know, and until we dial it down to that individual person or treatment, and we always have to say treatment, even if it does completely eradicate it and cure something, we can't say that. So it's like all these catchwords that they take away from us that a doctor can use in an office and give us something that maybe is 60 or 16% successful with its patient. We can't do that when it would cause no possible harm. So there's a lot of things that have to change with the
it
classification.
sounds like there needs to be an intermediary between what you just described, because I'm in the same boat. Those are some of the same rules I'm looking at for the state. But somebody can, and whether or not, however that's portrayed or staged in the sense of how those stories are shared.
Yeah, it's that classification,
where it's not
right?
directly the companies, the shops doing it, but someone, some entity is sharing all of those
Statements.
things as
Yes.
free source knowledge through the source. You know, however it's done, I think there's ways to do it. You know, there's
there are.
there's
I
a
mean,
will
that's
and a
that
way.
whole supplement versus drug debate. You
Yeah,
know, with the
whether it
supplement,
be
you have such a
completely-
wider lane that you can move through
Well, and
with
that's
what you can
where-
say.
That's where the work that the Weird Brains PhDs are. That's where their stuff comes in.
I love what
comes
they do,
into
by the
place.
way.
I forget what's the group called, the Applied Pharmacology Group.
Yeah.
That's where their work comes in to play, and it's so important
Research.
because they are trying to establish those medicinal standards, and they're trying to establish, you know, use standards and different stuff, and trying to just at the forefront of it, acquiring data, and how does this make this person feel, and how did this affect this person. But if all that data is not collected and you don't have people at the PhD level doing that work, we'll never be able to say.
and I'm a
this
skeptic.
Cures
I
headaches,
just-
guaranteed. You know,
I don't think that even when we get there, I think we've been there for 50, 60 years. We've had the hard evidence. When it doesn't move money in Washington, it's just not going to change
Yeah,
anything.
well, that's a whole
And
nother-
at the end of the
That's a
day,
whole
curing
nother-
I mean,
anything
you can
doesn't
literally see it under a
change
microscope.
any- you know,
and we
but
still have these conversations where we have
Right.
to push and push.
We
and
have
push
to
for
push.
what is scientific fact, what actually happens, and it becomes, I think, what fits whose agenda.
right.
You know, whether or not an industry falters because of this advance. I ultimately believe, like, best case scenario, let's call it a pipe dream. You know, what we do has always been on the holistic side, even when we dive deeper into the scientific realm of what some of these labs are doing with cannabis in general. But at some point, you know, let's say solventless, you know, hash. I can't say hash is a pharmaceutical grade product. It is the raw essence of really, truly what the plant is, you know, from the trichomes on. At some point, I think our two industries are going to intersect where pharmaceutical application is going to meet exactly where we're at. And I don't want to shy away from what can be learned and applied from it, but I don't want, and obviously I don't think anyone here wants it, is for the inability to be able to do that research ourselves and do the R&D and be able to help. Because like what I just said previously, if it doesn't fit the right agenda and the wrong group is losing, then we're constantly running around this hamster wheel of a...
Well, yeah, and what if
Well
they
said.
said something like, you know, no crude extract, like, you know,
Right.
you can't have cannabis extracts that aren't completely refined. There goes hash, there goes live
No
resin.
full spectrum.
there
Yeah,
goes-
know
there
what
goes-
the plant was from the
Yeah,
beginning.
what if
exactly.
we were forced
No entourage
by,
effect.
you know, they're like, okay, we have to standardize this is what you guys wanted.
Right.
And then we're forced into isolate and fucking distillate for the rest of our lives.
decolored
you know,
We just got
powders.
past that with the
Yeah.
CBD.
Yeah, so
I mean,
no,
so
that's an
honestly-
interesting
Decolored
take on it
powders.
Is
That's all it is.
yes, what we do is holistic in a sense, and if you kind of take that away and you do standardize it, then you might take away
Might
what we
lose exactly
what
what
we
it
love most.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
the
why
raw
I think
essence
the
of it.
natural
Yeah.
crude,
The truest
you know what I
expression.
mean,
I just
of the
want
plant.
both. I want to be able to buy Everclear and I want to drink a nice wine.
Well,
Yes,
and
I wanna
people should
the
have the
option.
right to do what they like, as long as
Exactly.
they don't infringe upon the rights of others.
That's
As
it.
long as we all live in
You
peace
dirty
and harmony on this
anarchists.
beautiful planet and
100%.
universe.
Let's do it.
But that being said, I think that it does need a leadership push. Like Art and I work in a lot of other industries other than hemp and cannabis, like traditional pharmaceutical academia, and you see like the money that is literally printed in order to oftentimes fund life-changing research like the National Institute of Health, you know what I mean? All these different organizations that are giving out scholarships and grant money to universities that are, you know, old people that have stuck around universities long enough to, because they're continuing to be passionate about what they're doing, and young people that bring new ideas and are studying and are passionate about what they're doing. And those people do research and they push industries forward. And I think it's time for people to look at hemp and cannabis and plant medicine as a whole that way, because if we are bringing that to the university academia realm where we could do research, we can really kind of work on causality. You know what I mean? There's a lot of different folks that are pioneers of that currently. You know what I mean? WeedMD did a lot of work for that in Canada. A lot of really talented academics and researchers, you know what I mean? But at the same time, we're not even in a place where people can be a part of this industry and be like free of any sort of compromise. Like, we have to free Edwin and we have to fight all of these different regulatory issues. Like, we have all these problems in the industry that need solving, and we're not doing the work to make sure that we understand how it helps people so that we can find a place for the incredible biodiversity and all the different genetics and cultivars and types of concentrates, solventless, ethanol, hydrocarbon, butane, propane, etc. Like, I think they all have a place. We just need to take a breath and find where and why and how.
And then push harder.
Yeah, exactly.
Push
and push
harder.
harder.
Then push
Always
harder.
push harder.
Guys, this has been a great talk. Can each one of you just down the line tell us, like, give your name again and where people can find you or how they can, you know, learn more about you?
Yeah, so Art Leon, Western States and Western States Botanical. You can find us on westernstates.com or westernstatesbotanicals.com.
Or on Across International's website. We're an incredibly proud distributor and partner with Western States Botanicals and chemistry too. If you're looking for a pharma centrifuge, chemical centrifuge. Maxwell Puebla-Dubin, sales development, R&D, and training manager of Across International, and incredibly grateful, passionate friend of all these wonderful gentlemen on this panel, for which I immensely appreciate having the time to talk about where this industry needs to go. Thank you guys so much. Across INTL on Instagram and acrossinternational.com is where you'd find our wonderful laboratory and post-processing.
He's a very reachable man.
Distillate Don, and we're at Farmers Brands on Instagram and Farmers Media on YouTube.
Fox on Instagram, Fox Tracks in the Wild. You can also find us in Washington State under the Brands Method, company Curation, and 2025, Fox Tracks will be in the I-502 market. So yeah, that's where you can find it.
And you still know who I am. Thanks for coming.